Hi, we're back for another edition of Post Media's Ottawa Senators panel. Bruce Garriock and our special guest today, Steve Warren from TSN 1200. Great guy, just spells his last name wrong.
One syllable versus two.
Anyway, we're going to talk about the Californians, get started with the California trip the Senators were on. 2 out of 3 wins, which I think 2 out of 3 ain't bad in the sense that they went into that trip on an 8-game losing streak, came out of it with some positives, and especially I think we saw something from the kids. Steve, what did you think on that trip?
I think it's really encouraging. I mean, when you look at any given team in the National Hockey League, when they make that California trip, you get 3 games in 4 nights. I think they're most of the time happy with 2 out of 3. I think the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I think is clearly the best team in hockey right now, if they go to California like that, or any East Coast team goes to California and gets 2 of 3, I think they're absolutely thrilled by that. Then you compound things with the Senators, who were going into that trip dead last overall in the NHL and had the injuries to so many key guys like they did. Of course they're thrilled.
Well, I think they have to be happy with that trip. I think one of the things we saw is that they played pretty well in Anaheim and LA in back-to-back games in a difficult situation. Not difficult teams to play against right now, but they also got good goaltending from Anders Nielsen. And I also thought that Saturday night in San Jose, while they lost 4-1, I thought they competed pretty hard and did a good job. I think the one thing we saw out of this trip, though, was that perhaps there is a light at the end of the tunnel for Anders Nielsen, because he hadn't won a game since October, and for him to come in and show what he could do, they're kind of test driving him for next year, see where he goes. I think there were some positive signs. Obviously, they got some difficulties on the injury front again, but all in all, they have to be pleased with where that trip went.
Okay, so let's talk about goaltending, because I agree with you. You went into it, I think it was a personal 11-game losing streak for Anders Nielsen. We didn't know much about him other than he was a big guy and he seemed to kick out a lot of rebounds in his first couple of games in Ottawa. He goes out there, plays really well against Anaheim, and they go right back with him the next night in LA, which, mild eyebrow raiser there because they had Hogberg, who's maybe part of the future in net. But again, back-to-back, really good games. And even in San Jose, he played pretty well. Martin Jones was a little bit better in San Jose on the other side. But really, goaltending was not a problem on this trip.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. I think you talk about Nielsen. He had that tough start in his first game with Ottawa. But I think since then, he's been a big body. His reaction time has been good. He moves well in the net. He's decent stick handling with the puck. That's something Craig Anderson certainly struggles with from time to time. I don't think he's a replacement for Craig Anderson per se, but when you look at what Mike Condon's game has been as the backup, he's been injured obviously, but even when not injured at the start of the year and going through most of last season, I think he's got a chance to be the backup goalie on a permanent basis when Craig Anderson returns.
The question is Craig Anderson when he's back.
I think they're hoping that Craig Anderson, based on the fact that he skated last week, will be back Wednesday night against Colorado Avalanche, if not Friday against the Carolina Hurricanes in Raleigh or Saturday in St. Louis. I think the hope is that Craig Anderson plays this week. I think that, based on Nielsen, though, I think they feel like they maybe have a guy they can count on. One of the things that was said about Nielsen when he came from Vancouver, though, was he had played pretty well, and he hadn't got the offensive support from the Canucks. He played pretty well in those 3 games, but he also in 2 of those games got the offensive support that he needed, and he made the saves when the Senators needed saves.
The other thing that I thought coming out of California, and we've talked about this a lot this year, is about the young players and the young defense, and they've done a roller coaster ride. We saw Max Lajoie at the quick start. He's been ups and downs. Christian Jaros is getting more and more time here with the Senators, even power play time now. But Christian Wolanin, who was called up basically because of injuries, stepped into the lineup. He played 23 minutes against San Jose the other night. Here's a guy taking advantage of an opportunity. I mean, I'm calling this thing the Christian uprising. For a while there, you had Jaros and Wolanin playing together. They're not going to win the Stanley Cup this year. They're probably going to finish at the bottom of the standings, but there is hope again when you look at this young defense.
I've been singing the praises of Christian Wolanin for a long time on the air, and the reason I like this guy is because I believe he's the second best offensive defenseman on this team right now after Thomas Chabot. He doesn't make the team. He did not have a particularly great camp, but that happens. Somewhere along the way, though, it became this storyline and saga of, well, Landon's great in the offensive zone, but boy, he leaves something to be desired in the defensive zone. Well, wouldn't that put him in lockstep with every Ottawa Senator defenseman right now? So why are you coming down so hard on Will Landon? So I'm glad to see that he's getting the opportunity that he deserves, and he's getting the minutes now to go with it.
Well, and that's one of the things he showed, I think, down the stretch last year is he's got pretty good poise. He's got pretty good poise for a young defenseman. And I think one of the things that they've said that they're going to do on this team is give young players the opportunity. And I think that's what he's getting right now is with these injuries, with the injury to Ben Harper, he's getting the and Thomas Chabot, pardon me. He's getting the opportunity to play, and he's showing he can do something with that opportunity. For him to play 23 minutes, in difficult situations, I think that's almost a breakthrough for him. And I've listened to the same thing you have, Steve, about having to hone his defensive skills. But I also don't mind guys going to the American Hockey League and doing that, because I think that's not a bad place to learn to play in every situation either.
It actually is in some ways similar to Chabot last year, right? Chabot, we heard it over and over again. Different situation for the Senators last year, but Guy Boucher, Chabot's got to learn the defensive game. He's got to understand how to play as a pro in the American Hockey League. He comes up and he never looked back. And it's going to be interesting because if Chabot comes back this week, they got to make a decision again on defense. And I think Landon now has put himself in a position where, oh, geez, I don't think they can take him out of the lineup. So it's going to be intriguing. Just to further on the defense here, what are they going to do now with a guy like Ceci as we head into the trade deadline? Is it a possibility they trade the guy?
Well, I think it's a possibility, and I think it's probably been discussed internally, and I think there's probably been a show of interest from National Hockey League teams in Ceci. I guess the decision they have to make is, where does Ceci fit into their long-term plan, Steve? Because that's what this is all going to come down to. I always feel like if you take a guy to arbitration, that says something about what you think of him. And we know that Mark Stone did not want to go to arbitration. Clearly, they didn't like the way that Ceci valued his contract when they took him to arbitration last year. I'm not sure how the whole arbitration hearing went, but I imagine that there were some things said that probably weren't very nice, because that's what arbitration is about. Is both sides, the player points out what he thinks he brings to the team, and the team usually points out what they think the weaknesses are. And I guess they have to decide, Steve, where does Ceci fit into all of this going forward?
That's the thing. I think that the Ottawa Senators hold Ceci in pretty high esteem. I think that they have him ranked very high on the depth chart. I do not, however. I think he's a 4, 5, 6
right.
defenseman, and then if you rank him there, then now you have to look at his salary right now. He makes north of $4 million right now.
4.3.
He's not going to step back from that. It's only going upward. And so if that's the case, and if the Sens buy in, and I don't know where they are right now with him. He has not had a particularly great year.
Yeah, but
they're in the situation they're in. He's got to play the minutes he's playing, doesn't he, Ken? But
I
don't know.
Okay, but
maybe,
hold on.
I don't know what you were going to get to.
Yeah, but maybe not. Like now you've put him in that position where he's playing 24, 25, 26 minutes, and you're throwing him out there because you needed to win. Now, it's about the future now, and Ceci isn't going to be one of the top pairing defensemen, and if they can't win with him in that position, then maybe you make a decision and say, let's move on. Maybe you get, I don't know what you get for him. If he gets traded now to a depth team, as a depth defenseman to a team at the trade deadline, a 5th or 6th defenseman, do you get a 3rd round pick for him? Do you get more than that? I think the contract is too much for what he is.
I think you could get more than a 3rd round pick simply because I think teams would value him, and I think people would see value in Ceci. And don't ever forget that every general manager thinks if they go and get a guy, that they can make him better than he was with his last team, and that happens all the time.
Yeah, I'm speaking from a perspective of if I were evaluating the Ottawa Senators and kind of running the show, I have them as a 4, 5, 6. Yeah. I don't think the Senators have them as a 4, 5, 6.
No, and they've rolled him out into that position.
Yeah, so if that's the case, then there's certainly a possibility that they try and get him done again for next year. They see something in him that I do not. I would trade the guy before the trade deadline, with respect, of course. But again, it's only because I rank him where I do, and I don't want to pay him much more than he's getting now. And he'll get more if he stays.
Okay, so like with Mark Stone, like with Matt Duchene, I think it's going to be a case of wait and see here to see what happens with him. Guys, a busy week here coming up here. Again, Colorado comes in, then the back-to-backs on the road. It's a dad's trip. What where do we go from here? What are you expecting to see? What do you need to see from this team if you're a fan to say, hey, there's some hope here?
I think the only thing that matters to the average fan is what happens with Duchesne and Stone. What kind of commitment do you have to winning? It's almost the rest of the season is less about what's happening on the ice and more what's happening in the boardroom between agent and Pierre Dorion. If you press me for what I think about the on ice product, I think with the return of all these really key guys from injury, I think you're going to have a fairly entertaining product most nights, as you did near the start of the season when they were, with the exception of JG Pageau, mostly full strength. So I think they'll be competitive most nights. They'll be very good at home, and they're not a playoff team, however.
Well, look, they've got 4 games left before they go into that. It's the All-Star break / 5-day mandated break, and then they play on the 22nd, and then they don't play until February 1st. They've got 4 games left going into that. It would be good for them to go into that on a positive note. But there's going, as Steve says, there's going to be an awful lot of focus here on what happens before February 25th and the trade deadline. Because if Pierre Dorion is going to, I'm sure coming out of their scouting meetings, which wrapped up Sunday in Florida, they're going to have to make some decisions on what direction they're going to take with Stone, Duchesne, and Ryan Dzingel. Myself personally, I think Dzingel is going to get moved before the deadline. I just don't think that he's going to be part of this going forward. I do think they want Stone and Duchesne to be here. They're the priorities. They've got to get down to business with them, and they've got to know what they're going to get for those guys too if they can't get them signed. So a big month coming up, really.
Yeah, really off ice as much as on ice, really, in terms of the long-term future for the Senators. Thanks again for tuning in. I want to thank special guest Steve Warren.
Any parting gifts coming?
Absolutely. Just stay tuned.
Nice.
Take care. Thank you.